Hey everybody, welcome back. It's episode 10 of Game Retail Rambling. I'm your host Travis Severance, live from Millennium Games Studios, the largest game store in the country. Coming to you from, we didn't get to even see the eclipse because of the clouds, Rochester, New York today. It's great to be back once again, talking to you guys a little bit today about Games Workshop. The previous episode was awesome. The comments came fast and furious there. Appreciate the feedback that everybody had. Good conversation during the show and after the show as well. If you don't know, if this is your first time tuning in, what happens is after we go off of Twitch from the show, we do an AMA that's usually about 10 to 15 minutes long. Last week was 45 minutes, which put me into overtime, so you guys are going to have to pay double for this show. I've got a lot to talk about as far as Games Workshop goes. There's three primes that I look at in the industry, really four. And when I talk about primes, what I mean is the first in a category or the strongest in a category, the most consistent in a category. So the three primes as I identify them in the industry right now are Games Workshop for miniatures, Dungeons and Dragons for role-playing games, and Magic the Gathering for card games. All of those sort of started those categories or have been the ones that have gone forward in our industry and been pretty consistent. A little bit about Games Workshop. As of 2023, $564 million in revenue, 2,700 employees. The stock this morning was trading at $1.3069. I am a shareholder. I believe in the stock. The stock's done actually pretty well since they've gone public. It's nice too because I get to hear the investor calls and be a part of that. The company itself was founded in 1977. White Dwarf magazine was the first thing that they did, so sort of talked about fantasy and sci-fi. And then in 78, they opened a retail store where they sold fantasy items and different things like that. And then they formed Citadel Miniatures in 1979. First edition of Warhammer came out in 83. And shortly after that, they started a sci-fi range of miniatures too, with a specific character called a Space Marine. And it's the first time we'd ever seen a Space Marine. And then shortly after that, there were rules for that Space Marine called Rogue Trader, and that evolved into Warhammer 40,000 after a little while. They got the Lord of the Rings license in 2001, shortly after the success of the movies. Dawn of War was another platform thing that they came out with in the computer space that was sort of an RTS based in the 40K world. 2015, they switched from square bases over to circular bases for fantasy, so they moved into the realm of Age of Sigmar. And today there's roughly 400 independent Warhammer stores across the globe and lots of independent stockists like myself. There's some differences between those two things, and I'll certainly talk about those today. As a person with Games Workshop, my first experience with it was shortly after I got out of basic training. I happened to be in a mall store. I was headed to Cancun with all the money that I made from basic training, bringing my girlfriend, my best friend, and his girlfriend, and I bought a couple of White Dwarf magazines to read on the plane. When I came back, I ended up really wanting to understand what Warhammer Fantasy was like. At the time, I think they were in 5th edition. So it was Bretonnian and Lizardmen in the box set. You had to buy the box set to get the rules. I didn't care about Bretonnians and I didn't care about Lizardmen. I was a Chaos player. So after I bought the giant box set for the rules and didn't really need the miniatures, I got into Chaos, which meant I had to buy the Realm of Chaos box because I was playing Chaos, so I needed another box, and there was a Battle Magic as well, so I needed the Battle Magic so I could cast spells. And this stuff started to pile up to me, and then I started buying Ungor, which are just these garbage screening units, and a 6-pack of them was like $20 at the time, and I needed like 100 of them, and I'm up at the register, and I'm like, man, this is about $400, and I've got about 12 miniatures that I'm going to play. So it's an expensive hobby. It is the Cadillac of miniatures gaming. It's certainly the top end of everything. It is as much a lifestyle and an expandable game as there have ever been in this space, and their miniatures are priced that way. So it's a game where it's not for the faint of heart or the weak of wallet. As far as numbers for us internally, it completely dwarfs the rest of the section of miniatures that I have. To give some roundabout numbers, it was 18 times the rest of every other miniature that I sold for all the categories in the store. So if I add together everything from Atomic Mass, so Star Wars Legion, X-Wing, Shatterpoint, Marvel Crisis Protocol, Battletech, D&D Onslaught, we sold 18 times as much Games Workshop product. Games Workshop product is divided into a couple of different buckets. There is Warhammer Fantasy, which is called Age of Sigmar now, although they just started the Old World, which is a trip back to the square bases. Inside of 40K, there is Kill Team and Necromunda that sort of live in that world, but they're smaller skirmish games. There's Blood Bowl, which is sort of a take on a fantasy American football sport, and there's a handful of other skirmish games that are in there as well, Warcry and Underworld as well. So the line is fairly broad. It's actually split into two companies. There's Specialist Games, and then there's Citadel Miniatures, which is technically Games Workshop proper. Rob from the Honest Wargamer just did a really nice, his own take on what the split looks like and how weird the balancing is for that sort of stuff, and how there's some internal struggle that's going on between them because recently they announced that Bone Splitters was going to the old world and Chaos Beastmen are no longer in Age of Sigmar. So if you want to know a little bit more about that drama and how the company itself splits, I would suggest you go over and you watch Rob, the Honest Wargamer's video. He's got a ton of experience with Games Workshop. He is certainly an influencer in this space that I pay attention to. Great guy to listen to when it comes to certain things. And there's times when I tune in because I don't understand what's going on with everything as well. Back to 40K and fantasy. So we carry the full line. All those lines that I was talking about in the store, we carry it. There's a massive amount of it that we have on the shelf. We carry everything that the 40K trade line has. We carry everything that the Age of Sigmar trade line has. We pick our spots when it comes to the specialist games. We don't carry all of that stuff. We sort of bring it in and we bring it out as it's popular. It doesn't do as well for us consistently. There's a smaller group of those people. Sometimes those are boxes that you can use in the bigger game, the broader game. Sometimes people use them as stand-ins for models that they don't necessarily have on the line that they represent. There's a whole lot of different opportunities in the skirmish games. If you want to get into the game, can be a nice way to buy something that's in that world, play it at a little bit smaller price point. Usually the skirmish boxes cost about the same as a video game. So maybe they're $50 or $60 for an entire squad, whether you're playing fantasy side or Necromunda or Kill Team. And a lot of times those miniatures can translate into the big game too, so it's not a wasted purchase as well. The benefits that Games Workshop brings, aside from the fact that they've been around for 40 plus years, they have a pretty loyal and dedicated fan base. They're very opinionated. They're very passionate. I enjoy a lot of the players that play Games Workshop that come into our store. They've been Games Workshop players from the time that I started in the store, so it'll bring you back to like 2001, 2002. They continue to survive. They went public a couple of years back. Their stock has continued to grow and grow and grow. The rule sets are consistently updated. They do a really good job of trying their best to balance it out so the meta doesn't stay stale. It's never truly balanced. I think balance is something that, as a game designer myself and as somebody that plays a lot of games, we strive for, but the reality of it is if it was perfectly balanced, we would just get to the point where there's no real excitement in games. It would turn into chess. Not to say that chess isn't completely enamoring and awesome to watch all the time. I'm excited for Queen's Gambit season 2 coming out on Netflix soon, and I've certainly watched some online chess myself. And Searching for Bobby Fischer was a fantastic underrated movie. But I think in general, like, the imbalance is the exciting part about the game. It's figuring out things. It's what people get to talk about around the water cooler. So I named this episode A Beautiful Mess, and it actually comes from a Rolling Stone article back in the 70s. There was a Scottish band called Donovan, and the lead singer for Donovan, good-looking guy, handsome guy. They're most famous for the song Season of the Witch, which, like 80% of all horror movie soundtracks now have Season of the Witch in some form on it. Led Zeppelin used to open up, and they do their sound check a lot of times with Season of the Witch. So Donovan, when they broke up, had a lot to do with drugs and alcohol, and the cover for the Rolling Stone magazine was called What a Beautiful Mess. So that's where the title for today's episode come from, because Games Workshop, while I've listed all the things that they do wonderful and they're remarkable and they've got a great line and they've got the best miniatures on the market and they have a fantastically loyal fan base and they are responsible for a giant chunk of miniature sales in my store, to the point where I could get rid of all the rest of the miniatures that I have and only sell Games Workshop and probably be as successful or maybe even more successful than I am, because I wouldn't have the distractions that I have with everything else. But it also puts a lot of pressure on that line. And as a business owner, what I've found is it's nice to have those anchor prime games to sort of be able to wrap my hands around, to be able to have those keep the lights on. But a lot of times the bonuses and the extras come from the diversity that we have within those lines. So the things that we can make and the way that we create different customers has less to do with Games Workshop sort of continually trudging along and more to do with what we're doing with Games Workshop and what we're doing with the rest of the products in the market. So when I look at some of the things that have frustrated me over the years when it comes to Games Workshop, I'll give you a recent one. Old World, which was a step back to the way that Warhammer Fantasy used to be. So we're square bases and we're moving tactical combat. This is the sort of thing that, George R.R. Martin loves in wargaming, right? We're pivoting, we're shifting. We've got a row of archers, we've got a cavalry, we've got a, men at arms in the beginning to sort of people screening units to take the charge, so on and so forth. This is your standardized historical war game, but we're going to use fantasy and spells and stuff. This is what Old World was. And Old World is something that's done by Specialist Games. There was a whole lot of build-up. There was a lot of waiting around to see what was going to happen. They started previewing the miniatures. People were really excited about the miniatures. I wasn't excited about the miniatures because there were miniatures that I was playing with like 15 years ago that didn't seem like they were updated or cool, or why aren't they using these plastic miniatures? And at the time, I didn't realize that Specialist Games was sort of handling that sort of thing, which makes a lot of sense now. But what happened was the week of that release, number one, we were allocated a whole ton. So we were only allocated 8 rule books, give or take, and not so many starter sets. And there was a handful of units that we only had a couple of and different things. So I had to chop up these units with, I guess my favorite customers. We just went like we always do in time order. Whoever put their first order in, we went first in, first out. And we went down the list and, got about a third of the way through, and that's what we could fulfill based on what they decided to give to us, regardless of the size of our account. So to use some round numbers, we order about $240,000, $260,000 worth of Games Workshop product annually at this point. Right now, we're up 36% year over year. So we've seen a hell of an increase on their stuff, which is interesting because it's not a new release for Age of Sigmar is coming out, but there's nothing really new about 40K that's coming out. It just shows that there's maybe a flight to quality here. We've seen some dips in some of the other miniatures lines that we used to do well with, and the consistency of Games Workshop is something that's really hard for people to turn their back on. But getting back to the issue with the Old World stuff, so the weekend that it was supposed to launch, so this is a big launch for us, even though that we've got, allocations and things that we're dealing with. There's a storm. They're out of Tennessee, so there's a storm, and they're letting retailers know that they will not be receiving their product on time for the release. Rather than just saying, let's do the release the following week, they said, we're just not able to get your product out to you. The frustrating part for me was I have 9 miles from here, there is a Warhammer World store. So there's independent stockists like myself, and then there's 400-ish Warhammer World stores that are run by 1 or 2 people that Games Workshop corporate decides to pop up. So there's one about 9 miles from here. They announced that the team of people at the warehouse kicked their product out on time to be able to make sure that they had it for release. If they could have gotten the boxes out for those stores, they should have been able to get the boxes out for all stores, or they should have pushed the release date back. So that's a little bit of dirty pool there. Like, we're already on uneven ground in terms of those Warhammer stores are allowed to have exclusive miniatures, and there's different things that they get that we can't necessarily get. It's not a huge difference, and I look at the Warhammer stores in general and the people that work at them as a net positive for me as a retailer. I don't have one in exactly my backyard. 10 miles is, a 15-minute, 20-minute drive from my store to the place to get there. They create a whole ton of players. They recruit a bunch of players. They have a bunch of events. They get people into the hobby. And the reality of it is we carry significantly more inventory than they do. We carry all the Specialist Games and stuff. So in general, I don't have an issue with any of those stores outside of, and this isn't their fault, this is the decision that was made by Games Workshop themselves. They decided that a major launch, they were going to kick it out the door for them, but they weren't going to do the same for me as a retail store. And I know that happened to a ton of independent stockists throughout the country. Instead of just backing that release up a week so the weather could clear out, they gave an unfair advantage to their specific stores themselves. So that's frustrating. Frustration number 2 is, based on sales, they decide to pull certain things from trade sales. So you have their website, which everything's available for. You have trade sales, which is everything that's available for independent stockists like myself and the thousands of us around the country that stock the Games Workshop product. We can order from both things, but when we order, so the online website itself has online exclusives. If you were to scroll through their website, which is updated and not the greatest, you'll see a bunch of online exclusive content. Now, a lot of it doesn't have any quantity because the inventory is all gone, specifically if you look at Old World. I can order those products. It's a separate ordering portal that I have to use. It costs me more money to do that. And when it comes in, it actually comes in, and this is the sort of trade dress product that I get. So here we've got, when I have Corvus Cabal. So this goes on my shelf, and I get to sell this. Now, it's based on sales that they determine what they're going to have in that spot or what they're not going to have. Some people can say it's giving them a competitive advantage by having a wider catalog on the online store. I don't necessarily care. Right up until what they decided to do with Age of Sigmar was they were going to have things called General's Handbook. The General's Handbook is amazing. Every 6 months or so, they come out with a new General's Handbook. It's the new scenarios for organized play for the game. They update some models. There's some balancing that happens. Some things become, some armies become stronger, some get weaker, so on and so forth. The challenge is, with Age of Sigmar, the line itself, throughout the years, they've taken more and more and more and more and more of that product line out. So if I look at something like Dwarves as an example, not Kadarin, there's only like 3 products that I can sell. That's not even enough to make a competitive army. Now, if you go online, you can take a look. There's a lot more units and there's a lot more things available. So they went out of their way to create General's Handbook to make the Age of Sigmar units better, which is great. They updated the armies. They try to keep it competitive. They try to give everybody sort of a turn in the limelight as far as being a good army and stuff. But from a retail perspective, their trade range line doesn't allow me access to those. So if I'm going to sell Age of Sigmar to customers that want to buy a complete army to be able to play competitive or casual or a slow grower league or something like that, I can't do it with just the trade sales stuff because they've already decided sales dictate, and they take this stuff out of trade sales. And I've never seen them, and somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, them take something that went online exclusive and they put it back to trade sales. So, well, what's the problem? It's based on sales and things. Well, first of all, I can't sell my customers that want to play Age of Sigmar a complete experience unless I decide to pay more. And then a lot of that online exclusive stuff isn't even available. So they went through the process of design and development to make those models relevant and to make those armies relevant. And then in order to do it, I have to do an extra step to get them from a different place that's going to cost me more money. And for some of the armies, it's 75% of the range. In order to get that army in my store, I have to bring it in. And then on top of it, again, we're dealing with these. These are the boxes. So they got to read the thing. And it's got to look the way that it looks. And it's just not great. I would assume that they update those armies and make them relevant so they can sell more models. Well, if you're selling more models, then there probably should be an evaluation about those models to decide to put them back into trade sales, to put a box out there and to have it so I can sell a complete experience. So when they look at Age of Sigmar and they decide, okay, this line's a failure, or this line's not performing as well as it could have, or these armies are a little slower, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you've decided is to save us from ourselves, I guess. 75% of an entire army is not going to be available with trade sales. So if I want it, I have to take extra time out of my day. I got to do an entire extra process to be able to order stuff from a place that I don't normally order from. It's going to cost me more. It's going to come in. If I'm going to put it on my shelf, it looks ugly like that. It doesn't make any sense. The game would sell a lot better if there were more products available for me to sell for that game. And if it was in trade sales, it can still be online, except the other places can order that. So when you update the stuff for General's Handbook, I don't have to make this mad rush to the website to grab the thing before it sells out, because it's going to sell out pretty quickly because you just use the rules to update the thing to make it better in an effort, hopefully, to sell more of those models. Allow me the same grace to sell those models. Bring it back into trade sales, make it not an online exclusive, and flatten the thing out. Age of Sigmar sales will go up if you have more Age of Sigmar products to sell. It's just math. Today, what I'm going to talk about in my top 7 is top 7 challenges for retail. So we've talked about Games Workshop. Obviously, they're successful. $564 million in revenue last year. I don't enjoy some of their stock calls. This isn't a number. Maybe it'd be an honorable mention, but sometimes their stock calls go something like this. The sales went really well for us. Boy, we had a kick-ass schedule. We released all the stuff. We're so cool. We did such an awesome job. Our Warhammer stores are just really cranking. If the numbers are down, they don't say, well, we didn't produce enough models for retail or we needed to allocate them. What they say is, yeah, the numbers on sales for independent stockists just weren't where we projected them to be. So take all the credit when it's a positive and then deflect yourself when it's a negative. And I mean, the investors on those calls don't know enough internally to be able to take a look or call them out on that or ask that question. And they're certainly not going to say, well, part of the problem is that our ability to be able to ship product out in Memphis is 4 weeks behind, or we can't keep enough talent there to be able to ship boxes out, or whatever they're dealing with regard to the way the inventory is. So challenges for retail, selling Games Workshop product, and these are in varying degrees of frustration. It is in order of how much they drive me nuts. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm sure if you're a retailer and you've dealt with this line before, you have your own top 7, or maybe you have top 700. Some people despise it more than I do. In general, I love the company. I carry the company. I order, like I said, a $250,000 of my money is invested into them on an annual basis, if not more. That doesn't count the amount of time that we put towards events and having other things happen in the store. It's a line in a company that I care about. In fact, like I said, I'm a shareholder. I want them to be successful. So here's 7 things that I deal with on a daily basis or a fairly regular basis that are challenging for me as a retailer at times. So number 7 is price point. They are the highest. They are the Cadillac. They are the most expensive miniature that I have that I sell. No problem. Somebody has to be the highest priced. That's not an issue. Part of my issue comes from annual price hikes, though. So annually, in June, July, we get somewhere between an 8, 13, 16% price increase on whatever they just decide to do. It doesn't matter if that model's a decade-old kit, like Land Raiders or anything like that that they've had in the line forever and ever and ever. They haven't had to make a new mold. They've continued to make that mold for years and years and years and years and years, and there's still a 13 or 17% price increase. Now, I get it. Shipping costs, employees, all the stuff that I talked about last episode, there's some amount of that, but I certainly don't go around my store annually and increase all the prices on my products 16%. So price point can be challenging. That's more challenging as far as recruitment goes, and I get that the way that the hobby is set up is it's supposed to sort of red velvet rope it so that only certain consumers can afford these things, and some of that is them making skirmish games that are easier to afford. Number 6, the store finder on their website. So they revamp their website. You click on their website, it clicks you over to another website all the time. When you're on there and you click on the store finder and you want to find an independent stockist, if you have your mouse and you have a scroll wheel, you have to scroll 8 times before you actually get to the part in the middle of the page that you could find a store. Everything before that is advertisements on their new releases or how to buy it off their website or what to do. And then finally, when you scroll down 8 times, 8 full wheels on scroll, I counted yesterday when I was doing the research for this, you can click on Visit Us and put whatever information that you want to in there. Now, of course, what they do when you do that is you put the zip code in, and they have 2 sections. One section is the Warhammer independent stores that are there, that are at the top of the list, that are all the stores within 30 miles of your search. So there's a store in Canada, and there's the one 9 miles around me. And then if you scroll down to the next one, the lower tier one, there I am as an independent stockist. Now, it doesn't matter if I've got 1,800 square foot dedicated just to their space, and I'm currently carrying a little over $124,000 worth of their product on the floor. There I am down there in the bottom, as opposed to being mixed in with the rest of the stuff because my inventory is better than theirs. It just is. Number 5, online exclusives. So they sell stuff online that I can't sell in store, and I can't buy it, and there's no price that I can buy it at. I can't get a hold of collector's edition things. There's other things that over the course of the year that I can't do. There's a subscription for an entire magazine now that I can't do, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that I can't sell and I can't participate with. I've talked about exclusives many times with regard to publishers and how they use that in a transactional way to try to increase their direct-to-consumer sales. It creates an uneven selling platform, and it makes it really hard for me to swallow when it comes to that sort of stuff, given the amount of work that we do to continue to grow that brand. And then the GW retail exclusives too. So the Games Workshop specific stores that run their own stores, there's an anniversary model and there's some other models they have. That's less annoying to me. I get it. That poor guy that's there, because most of them are single store employee only. They're trying to do their best over there. I don't fault those guys at all. That's a hard job over there. They don't get to control any of their ordering. They have to deal with the space that they're given and things like that. So I don't begrudge my fellow Games Workshop specific employee. I think they do a really, really good job with the way that they handle the product. They do a great job with recruitment and teaching people, and they have a lot of passion. So I appreciate them on every level. Number 4 is no local OP support kits. All of organized play for both games has to be done by me. I have to create whatever I'm going to create. There's some scenario books that they come out with and stuff like that, but there's no tournament kit. There's no tournament software. There's none of that stuff that I can use. It's frustrating to me, given the amount of events and how popular the events are, that they don't have any sort of local organized play kit. Number 3 is stock issues. The stock issues are well known. We have times when we put an order in and it doesn't hit the door for 3 or 4 weeks. Sometimes it's more than that. On top of that, now they're using these robots apparently, so I'll get a box that'll show up. It'll be an entire box and it'll have one thing of paints in it. That's part of an order that's 92 lines. And then 2 days later, I'll get 2 boxes and they'll have 3 paints and a book in it. And then I'll get another order. So whatever they're doing with their new robot pickers over there to pick the boxes and stuff, there's no way it's cost effective right now. They haven't figured that out. And I'm sure they'll get in there and do that. I've heard they've got some state-of-the-art equipment over there that's doing that sort of thing. But in general, it needs to get better. And the amount of times that we have to collate all these boxes into this one area to make sure that I got everything on the invoice is frustrating. The fact that they're out of as many things as they are is also frustrating. Number 2 is no online ordering website for retail. So I talked about how I have to go online to order the exclusive stuff, which is a separate process on its own. But from an operational standpoint, I don't know why I can't go on a ordering website and just order all my stuff on my weekly reorder. I should be able to order all my pre-orders. I should be able to order everything that I want to for a reorder through just a website without having to fill out an invoice and go through the process of sending my rep and then my rep sending the thing back and me not knowing how much I'm going to get or whether I'm going to get it or not. All the frustration that comes into play when it comes to that and not knowing anything. And then the number one problem that I have with them in general is they have no back order system. So I order every week. There's a 1, 2, 3, 4 week delay. I don't know what's going to come in when it comes in. So my choices are, in week 2 of not having that thing and knowing whether I'm going to get it, do I then reorder it again? Well, the problem with that is if it does get stocked on the one that I placed from 3 weeks ago, then I'm buying that one. And then I'm buying the one in 2 weeks when I try it again, because I don't know what's coming on the one that I ordered from 3 or 4 weeks ago. If it does restock and they produce more there, now I've got one on that order. I've got one in the following order. I've got another one. I just wanted one. I didn't want 6 or I didn't want 3. I wanted one. So there's no way for them to keep a back order. So what I have to do is choose to not order, miss the window sometimes. And anybody that's tried to order Chaos War Dogs, I'm positive that's listening to this can certainly understand missing the window, because I think that's a product that, you know, they reprinted one time in the last 18 months. I got a couple of them. I happen to have the magical order that went through that time, but I have to put that on hold the entire time. So when I put that on hold and I have to wait, I don't know when the next time is that I should try to order that. And the answer is when they ship that invoice and they show me that it's not there, then the following week I can then place that on reorder, but I can't put anything in a back order. There's no back order system. If I had a back order system, I could just deal with my pre-orders and my reorders and go from there without having to worry about that. When it comes back in, boom, it gets put in the queue, but that is not something they do. An honorable mention is the way that they handle their credit. They decide my credit terms are going to be X. They will not ship me what's ready to be shipped if I placed an order, if that order was placed 4 weeks ago and the orders in my queue total up to what my actual credit is. They don't know how much of that they're going to ship, but they've decided, okay, let's use some round numbers. Let's say that my credit limit, and this isn't true, but let's say it's $10,000 and I have $2,000 in orders hanging out there. So I got 3 weeks worth of $2,000 orders. And this week I try to place a $6,000 order. Even when that third one would ship normally, they will say, no, we cannot ship that. You've exceeded your credit. I know that I'm not going to get everything on the $6,000 order. And why do I know that? Well, because every single time I've placed an order, I've carried that back order forward and I'm not going to get 80% of that stuff. So when it actually comes out to what I actually get it shipped, it's probably along that $2,000 line. But they won't ship me until I pay down the credit on the stuff that I haven't even gotten shipped to me before, to make it so that my credit line is available so that I can order. So yeah, there's a lot of frustration that happens with that, and having to do this math gymnastics of not understanding when I should be back ordering stuff and not knowing what they have in stock and how to buy it and those kind of things. All that to say, we're going to do $500,000 in sales this year. It's going to be lovely, and I'm going to enjoy that. And I've got a whole ton of customers that are going to be here, and they're celebrating it, and we're going to put a bunch more money into it. But like these 7 things and 8 things, if you want to count the honorable mention, if somebody there or somebody near them are actually listening, please just take this checklist and see how difficult it is for you as a corporation with $560 million in revenue and 2,700 employees to see if you can maybe address some of those things that I have that are suggestions and issues that I deal with. Because I promise you, if you talk to every independent stockist in the country, we would all love you more if you would just handle those things and do it in a nice rollout manner. And the reality of it is, the other thing that's a little bit weak over there is communication. I don't know anybody internally outside of my sales rep that I can talk to over there. Now that's wild to me, given how much I spend as an independent stockist to carry your product and how much of your product I sell. I can't talk to anybody that's at a management level over there. Now maybe it's because my feedback's direct and they don't want to hear what I have to say, but regardless of whether they want to hear what I have to say, this is reality. This is what I deal with. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't sell as much of your stuff. That doesn't mean that you can continue to suck. Like, get better, please. So I'm going to wrap it up with that. I will do an AMA after this. Next week's episode, I don't know. This was a pretty good beating on Games Workshop. Maybe next week I will talk about Wizards of the Coast and Magic. So thanks, everybody.